This is the real deal of law enforcement and the truth on the streets. This program is about cops, by cops, for cops, and the citizens they serve and protect. Each hard-hitting episode tackles the biggest challenges facing policing in America today. Drug interdiction and narcotics, gangs, active shooter response, police-involved shootings and transparency, immigration and sanctuary laws, police use of force, and de-escalation policies. With Chris DePerno, Randy Sutton, Marianne Robb, and John Savage.
Well, tonight's guest is a highly decorated DEA agent supervisor. He followed his father's footsteps and became the head of the New York City Drug Task Force. He is one of the foremost authorities on the drug cartels and their link with the collusion with China. Would you believe that? Collusion with China. He ran the DEA Special Operations Division of the DEA and had about 30 intelligence agencies under his command. I mean, they were different. They were like New York City police and other law enforcement agencies and stuff, but he ran it all. He lost a brother overseas in Afghanistan, and I want to thank him so much that his brother paid the ultimate price for our freedom, and that's just so much for him. Well, tonight he's going to tell us about the new, I guess, the news agencies that are not telling us about drugs in China. Derek, how are you?
How are you, Chris? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh my God, Derek, there is so much to cover with all the stuff that you've given us and stuff, but I want the listeners to first know about you. Derek, tell the listeners what you're all about. Who is Derek?
Well, I've been in law enforcement my whole life. I grew up with a father who was very dedicated to the DEA. He worked 30 years right out of college, Syracuse University. I started a job in New York with DEA. And 28 years later, I retired, and now I'm doing a lot of national security, public safety work, trying to educate the public because you can't get the news on the mainstream media. So we will continue to put out the messages about what's really going on out there in the world, because it's becoming way more complex, way more dangerous, and our cops are on the front lines and they're not getting supported. So we're going to continue to kind of push out the messages so our public gets some kind of information about what's going on. So I'm happy to be here and appreciate the invitation.
But Derek, so tell us some of the jobs you did at the DEA. I mean, you were a DEA supervisor. Not only did you run a task force, but you were the Special Operation Division's commander. Tell us a little bit about that before we get into the real meat and potatoes.
So let me give you a quick background. So first of all, I'm very proud to say that my was built working with the greatest detectives from the NYPD, the Suffolk County PD, the New York State Police, the Nassau County PD, and of course a lot of federal agencies. But the cops taught me the street. They taught me how to do the job, and then ultimately I got promoted. And then eventually I took my father's position. He was the chief of the task force for 11 years. I took over the job, which was really cool. I was there about 2 years. It's the largest and oldest task force. Drug task force in America, started in 1970 in New York City. And then I got promoted to work in the Special Operations Division in 2005. When I got down there were 9 agencies represented in the center. When I left, there were 30. We built up a very, very complex, operation, synchronizing the efforts against transnational criminals around the world. So it was very interesting, very exciting. And also, I feel privileged that I was given an opportunity to run the center.
So you not only were part of that, you built that Special Operations Division up to where it became a highly effective law enforcement tool, collecting intelligence for all over the world, correct?
Right. So basically, yes, I was lucky to be there for 10 years, which is very, very unusual in Washington for any senior executive to stay in one place that long. But because we had a lot of momentum, because we had a lot of threats, my leadership allowed me to stay there. But honestly, it was the best job because you start seeing firsthand the dedicated men and women around the world that are working in the different agencies that are going after threats, trying to keep America safe. So I did get a very unique perspective when I was there for 10 years.
Now, you briefed me about something that I had no idea about, but it's absolutely amazing. You investigated these violent gangs that are going on with the cartels. And let's start with the violence that's going on in these countries that the cartels are starting to do.
Well, first of all, number one, we don't have a public health crisis. We have a national security crisis when it comes to the drug cartels. The Mexican cartels are the most ruthless transnational criminal organizations in the world. They are involved with the most violent acts you've ever can imagine. For example, the Sinaloa cartel had a guy, the stew maker. His claim to fame was dumping human bodies in acid pits. So all they would find would be bones, right? If you pay attention to the news, you'll see the decapitations all over the place. They really enjoy taking, bodies and cutting their heads off and throwing their heads on dance floors at weddings, hanging, bodies from fence posts. So to intimidate and to threaten the civilian population and to their rivals, right? If you look at the weapons they use in the state-of-the-art, sophisticated, wartime, 50 caliber machine guns. They have drones that they're using now where they're actually starting to get involved with dropping different types of explosive materials. These guys are very sophisticated, but of course, they're running a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, which is global. This doesn't just impact the United States. This is a worldwide enterprise. And so it's very, very alarming because it's right on our southwest border. It's even more alarming when the president-elect is talking about open borders, because the types of people that are going to be lining up to get into our country, it's going to destroy America. And so we have a very serious issue with the cartels, but probably the most disturbing to me, we've heard a lot about China in the news, but what we're not hearing is China's relationship with the Mexican cartels.
Well,
And
that's
China's
my next
role-
question I wanted to ask you there, Derek, is
Yeah.
that you investigated and you found proof that there's a connection between China and the drug cartels smuggling drugs into the United States. Before we start with that, let's roll that first video you sent us. Amanda?
It's official. The United States is at epidemic levels in drug overdoses in this country.
Right now, we're in the worst drug crisis in the history of the country.
This is a national crisis that has to be addressed by every news agency who's not covering it and by the U.S. government.
Law and order must be a priority.
But if you look at the data going back to 1968 and the level of overdoses, you see a quantum leap begin around 2011.
81,000 Americans died last 12 months. That's 221 people a day dying from drugs.
Also look at what was happening in Mexico at that time. That's when violence from the Los Zetas and other cartels began to go through the roof. We call that mirroring. And so as we began to see the cartels double down around 2015 into fentanyl, this is where the overdose deaths domestically in the United States also began to take off.
China right now is involved in all aspects of the drug crisis in America. They have weaponized the America's addiction on drugs, and under the disguise of drug addiction, they're attacking our country. The cartels are going to use the most sophisticated technology. They're using encrypted apps. America has antiquated laws.
I want you to know this is fixable. And those of us who have fought the cartels and have worked at this problem for decades understand what needs to be done. And it will all begin when we designate the Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
Law and order must be a priority.
Derek, go ahead. The floor is yours. Please explain this connection with China and the drug cartels.
Okay, so first of all, just to make something really clear, the CDC statistics came out, and in the 12-month period ending May of 2020, there were 81,000 that died from overdoses. That's 221 a day. There's nothing like it in America. There's nothing other than the COVID right now, and who knows about that with the statistics, the smoke and mirror statistics on COVID. Everybody's dying from COVID. But what I can tell you is a lot of the reasons for the deaths is because the fentanyl that's being made in these Chinese labs in Wuhan and other locations in China, where they're dropping this chemical weapon on our country, and they know exactly what they're doing. They're making billions of dollars, and at the same time, they're destroying and they're destabilizing America. That's the plan of a communist country. They are trying to defeat the U.S. superpower threat, and they're going to use every means possible. They know they can't do a direct military attack against America, so they're going to weaken us by providing our population these very, very strong synthetic drugs that they're making in labs in China. They have a jihad against America, just like the Afghanis. They used to brag about how sending heroin to the West is like a jihad against the West. You're killing and you're making millions. So basically, they're weaponizing Americans' drug addiction, and they're driving towards destabilizing our society. But here's the thing. So I want to make sure this is clear. First of all, the Mexican cartels have been receiving chemicals for methamphetamine from China and other countries in Asia for many, many years. This didn't start overnight. The drug paraphernalia that's being used in all the different drugs, the marijuana grow operations now that nobody knows about. The Chinese nationals are coming to Las Vegas, coming to Colorado, they're going to Arizona, they're going to different states, they're buying houses and they're developing these state-of-the-art marijuana grow operations. They're making synthetic drugs in labs in China, K2 spice, bath salts. They're involved with cocaine trafficking around the globe, but of course, deadly fentanyl. Remember, 1 kilogram of fentanyl, that's 2.2 pounds, can kill 500,000 people, right? And they're only charging the cartels $5,000 a kilogram in China. And the Mexican cartels turn around and they can get up to $2 million or more from pushing it out. So I know Marianne from Arizona, so she's probably very familiar with the M30, the oxy pills that they're pushing out on the streets. So just to give you an idea, in Arizona, okay? So I have a lot of friends in the network of the law enforcement, and in 2015, there were 0 Mexi oxy pills seized. In 2016, there was 20,000 seized. In 2017, 54,000 seized. In 2018, 380,000. Then it went to 1.4 million in 19 and 5.6 million now just from DEA. Those pills contain fentanyl. One kid takes 1 pill, they die. That's why you're seeing deaths all over the country. The Ohio, coroner's office in one of the counties by Columbus just came out with a stat. 85% of the overdose deaths are from fentanyl, right? 73% increase from last year. So we have this crisis going on that nobody's even talking about. And to be honest with you, the worse it gets, the less people are talking about it. And it's pretty scary because these are people that have an obligation to protect the public, right? So it's nice of you people to let me come on the show and talk a little bit about it.
Absolutely.
If you look at the statistics, for an example, right, CBP last year seized 178,000 pounds of meth. You know why they're seizing so much meth? Because the cartels have industrial super labs now. They produce 7 tons of meth every 3 days. This is something we've never seen. Do you people remember back in 2007 in Mexico, they arrested a Chinese national and they seized $207 million in cash. Most of the cash was $100 bills, and it's the biggest cash seizure we've ever had in the history of drug enforcement. Guess what the guy was doing? Bringing in the chemicals from China. Well, guess what? Now it's out of control. That's why they're seizing thousands of pounds all over the country. It seems like every other week. And by the way, this week in Arizona, the DEA announced they had a new type of fentanyl, which killed 11 people in this past week around Christmas, right? It's some new type of fentanyl called parafluorofentanyl. I never heard of it, but it's just a new synthetic drug that's part of the fentanyl class. But this stuff is really seriously going to destroy our communities and our families. But nobody's doing anything about it. We're just talking about it. We're doing the same old things we've always done.
That's ridiculous. Derek, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for all your service that you have done your whole career. And I thank you for being out there, especially with DEA. That's a tough job. I'll work the streets any day. Hey, 2 things about the fentanyl. I just arrested a kid just not too long ago, and he's got the synthetic Percocet. And it's just the pills laced with the fentanyl, and he's just taking them because he can't get the Percocet. So, hey, it's easy to get. I think it's $10 a pill that he's getting off the street. And
Right.
he had 5 or 6
It's like Russian roulette because nobody knows what they're taking. They're getting these pills. They're coming in from Mexico. They're coming in from China. And what's happening is they use the pill presses and they mix it up. There's no quality control of these pills. There's no FDA approval. It's just a bunch of bad guys trying to make billions of dollars. They don't really care what they're making. But unfortunately, the citizens of the country are taking this stuff and they're dying.
That's it. And that's the question I have. Talking about the rate of people dying is growing. Explain how our young dying is China's end game. And before you answer that, we have a video to show you.
In my view, Dana, this is chemical warfare from China.
A drug known as fentanyl. I mean, we've been hearing about this for some time. It's getting worse. Now, how many Americans is it killing? And how many of those deaths can be attributed to China?
Synthetic compounds are coming from China. So we have China, too, working with the Mexican cartels. To move it into the country. A dangerous combination for America's national security. Chinese organized crime and the Mexican cartels have formed an alliance that we've never seen. It's kids that don't know what they're taking. You don't wake up. Your parents are finding you dead.
The drug is largely produced illicitly in China, the most lethal overdose substance. Now it's linked to nearly 3 times as many deaths. It's shipped to Mexico and then smuggled into the United States by the cartels.
People are dying at record levels. I mean, poor families and communities around this country are waking up to the horror of their children passed out and dead from overdoses of this poison coming from China and Mexico.
But for the Chinese, they know exactly what they're doing.
The Chinese are way more involved in the drug business than sending fentanyl to the U.S. They're involved in the money laundering now with all the cartel money going back to China. And they do know it's a weapons of mass destruction against this country.
It's Mexico and China together killing our people.
1 kilogram of fentanyl can kill 500,000 people.
Poison is made in labs in China. It's being dumped into our country, not only directly into Mexico, but through the mail, via the internet, directly from China.
It's Mexico and China together killing our people.
So, Derek, what is China's end game? What are they doing to us?
Well, like I said, it's an unrestricted warfare. They're trying to destabilize America. They're trying to weaken our country, which is working really well. The politicians aren't paying attention. So one day they're going to realize, and they'll see how far behind they are. But let me just go through something real quick. So the synthetic designer drug industry was booming in like the late 2008, 2009. We started getting a lot of synthetic cannabinoids and synthetic cathinones. As a matter of fact, Syracuse, I know, Chris and Buck are from up there. Syracuse was ground zero for the bath salts in like 2010. The poison control was getting thousands of calls, and then it doubled a couple of years later, right? People were having strokes. They were having kidney damage, brain damage. And basically, they started realizing it was all coming from these chemists in China. And so then what happened was the DEA and other agencies started taking a closer look at this, like, what the hell's going on? Like this one guy, Eric Chang, the chemist, was sending stuff to Syracuse, and the organization was making like $4.5 million a year from selling bath salts, right? And then we started looking at the K2 and the spice, right, where they buy the liquid in China, they bring it over to America, they spray it on leaf material, and then they put it in little bags, and they call it Black Mamba, Bombay, Blue Genie, Kush, Scooby-Doo snacks. And what they do is they advertise it as synthetic marijuana. The problem is it's poison. So we did 2 major operations starting in 2012, Operation Logjam and Project Synergy. But what really became disturbing is we started seeing these gas stations, bodegas, and convenience stores all over America where Middle Eastern males, young males, were selling this stuff from the gas stations and behind the counter. And they were cute. They were labeling the packages not made for human consumption to try to protect them from prosecution. But in reality, it was killing a lot of people. It was destroying people. So then, like, this was going on. And then all of a sudden, this fentanyl from China started coming up. And what we noticed is that kids were ordering it right online, directly from China. It was very easy to go online from your house. Nobody knows what you're doing. You're online, you're ordering it up, you're using PayPal, you're using the money systems, and you're getting the stuff delivered to your house. And then we started seeing a lot of people dying from fentanyl. Well, then the cartels started getting involved because they want to make money. It's all about making money. Once the population was addicted, they looked at this as a way to, cut down their overhead, and they no longer had to worry about the poppy fields and the conversion into heroin and stuff like that. It was easy to buy the pure fentanyl, but they didn't know what they were doing, and they still don't know what they're doing. So they're now seeing the amount of money that they're making because there's so many people addicted to opioids in America because the corporate cartels were never held accountable because of the corruption with people not wanting to go after the corporate cartels. And that's another whole story, right? The Washington Post had a big story about how the corporate cartels dumped 100 billion opioid pills into America in a 9-year period, right? From 6 companies, right? And there were only 3 companies that produced it. So what happened was kids had, sports injuries. They had legitimate injuries. They take these pills. They get addicted to the pills. Then they run out of pills. Then they start stealing them from everybody's house. Then they get addicted. Then they go to the street and they're taking this stuff that's not really legitimate and they're dying. So it's a vicious cycle that people didn't pay really close attention to.
Hey, Derek, real quick, you're saying China has got their cartel. You got Mexico with their cartel. Are you seeing them fighting? I want the money. I want the money. This is the fentanyl coming from China.
No, because the Chinese are super sophisticated. But one thing I failed to mention, which actually is really, really interesting. The Chinese now are dominating the money laundering services businesses for the cartels in America. And Las Vegas casinos is a big place where they're doing this. So they have legitimate Chinese business guys sitting at the tables, and these kids are running around the country taking deals from the brokers in Mexico, picking up $500,000 cash, turning it over to the casino guys who are gambling the money, and then they're transferring on their apps from one Chinese bank account to another bank account just to move the money overseas without going through the U.S. banks. So they're very sophisticated. They're not fighting. They're working in a lethal partnership, and it's a serious national security concern. But unfortunately, the politicians are not paying attention to any of this.
Randy, you're from Las Vegas. You have anything to say about that?
I play the penny slots, so I'm not running into any of these guys. But I do have a question for you, though.
Yeah.
Law enforcement is of course on the front line, and they're running into all of these the fentanyl and the derivatives, and we're seeing around the country officers who are falling prey to fentanyl overdoses just from touching this stuff. Exactly. What can be done to safeguard the law enforcement community?
Well, great question, Randy. I mean, the federal law enforcement agencies, I know they put a lot of time and effort into training state and locals, and it's a very serious thing. I remember the days when we hit heroin labs in New York City. We didn't even have masks on. We didn't have gloves on. We were the tough guys. We didn't need it, right? And I'm sure you guys know the same thing. I mean, everyone in law enforcement, tough guys. But nowadays, you go into a fentanyl lab, and if you don't have the proper equipment, you could die instantly. And we have had cases around the country. So I know there's definitely a lot of training. There's videos that have gone out. There's awareness out there. I know most of the departments are very familiar with this now. But at the end of the day, here's the scary part, Randy. Cops go out every day to save lives and to help citizens and protect the public. Sometimes they put that ahead of their own personal safety, right? We all know that. So cops are going to get sick. Cops are going to die because they care so much about the public safety aspects. So it's just a real serious problem. And, I'm not a medical doctor. There's a lot of different stories. What I do know is that, like I said, 1 kilogram, that's 2.2 pounds, can kill 500,000 people. It only takes a couple of milligrams, right? They say like the equivalent of 4 grains of salt can kill a human, right? That's how powerful it is, right? So people do have to be way more careful, and there are many cases around the country of cops getting sick because of this stuff.
Thank you.
Buck, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it is a great question, great response from Derek, because again, I think it shows still yet again so much of what is on an officer's plate on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis out on the street, right? You're stopping a car, you're searching a person, whatever the case may be. You're watching for danger. You're watching for all these different things. And now, obviously, you got to be concerned with whatever you may come in contact with in their pocket, or they put something down and you pick it up and say, hey, what, what's this? And all of a sudden you have that exposure, like Randy says. So for all the people that want to jump and do the Monday morning quarterback stuff, there is so much going on in even the very most routine type of stop that officers have to be concerned with. And that's a great example right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why my hat goes off to all police officers that are in the cars that are out on the road, because they don't get a chance to like plan an operation with a raid team and you got your machine guns and you have plenty of manpower. They're out there sometimes by themselves, and they do have a lot to worry about. And the worst part, actually, from my perspective, is even when they're doing the job, they don't get the support from their leadership and the politicians and the news media. And that's the most disgusting part of it all, because they're out there saving lives. And Chris brought up the example of the Nashville bombing, and you see how those brave officers went into the buildings, got people out of there, and they could have all been blown up and killed, and never, the families don't have them anymore. And so that's the disgusting part. We talk about defund the police, and these people have no idea what they're talking about, and it's really disgusting.
All right, I have a question for you, Derek. I mean, you've laid out such an amazing thing that's going on, and obviously this is a national security issue, and it's becoming a national security crisis if it isn't already. So why is this being ignored by our politicians and our government? I mean, there is absolutely a Cold War going on with China. There's absolutely, they're trying to hurt our youth. And it's silent. I don't understand that.
That's a great question. And I often think about that, Chris. Sometimes I feel like I'm wasting my time, but I'm going to continue ringing the bell. But here's the thing. First of all, President Trump inherited a dysfunctional mess from President Obama. Now, what do I mean by that? During the Obama administration, they paid no attention to the drug crisis. They didn't educate the kids. They didn't educate the families. They didn't educate the schools. They took it for granted because they thought this is like 1970, smoking a joint. They had no idea what was being sent to our country, and they didn't care. Then when President Trump gets on board, that poor guy was under attack from day one. And that's disgusting, because as they were wasting time on these collusion, delusion, and all of this illusion, all this crap that was complete lies, the president, didn't have time to really focus in like he wanted to. Now, I'll give you an example, though. The president did come out publicly and wanted to declare the cartels as, terrorist organizations, which would have really made a difference, in my opinion. And then, of course, all the politicians started getting nervous because they're always worried about the politics in Mexico because they're our southern border, right? And they misunderstood what declaring them as terrorists means. It doesn't mean we're going to drop bombs on Mexico. It means that we're going to use all the tools and authorities that U.S. law enforcement, Department of Defense, and intelligence community have available to go after these networks of criminals a lot more aggressively. Because Mexico, like the president now, he has his hugs for thugs policy, right? He's another one of these cheerleaders, socialist cheerleaders that wants to, cheerlead for the criminals, right? That's not working. It's failing. That's why he has an unprecedented level of murders in Mexico. The point is that this president, and that's why I'm still praying he'll get 4 more years, because he will focus on this issue. He's done a tremendous job with the CBP on the border. He did a great job getting that wall stood up. They're making unbelievable seizures. I know the CBP commissioner. He's working very, very hard, Mark Morgan and his teams, every day, despite the limited manpower and the accusations from the mainstream media. But here's the bottom line. There's so many problems coming his way. It's hard to kind of like deal with everything, especially when they're ripping you apart and your personal life is getting attacked. So I blame the Congress. I blame the mainstream media. They're the ones that are letting down America.
Derek, I want to thank you so much. We got to end it right here, but what a great interview. Derek, if people want to hear more from you, where can they go to listen to more from you? Do you have a website, or will you be on Newsmax or Fox again, or wherever?
I'll go
you're
on
amazing.
Fox, Newsmax, but I have a Twitter account, Derek Maltz _senior on Twitter. I post a lot of stuff daily. I have a YouTube channel with a lot of videos that I've edited. I have a Facebook group. It's a national security public safety group that I paste stuff every day. And there's been a big emphasis on China and Mexico because not enough people are talking about it. And so I'll continue to do podcasts and different types of shows like this one. Just try to get the message out. That's all.
Well, we're going to have you on again somewhere during the course of 2021 because the stuff that you're putting out, people have to understand there's a Cold War going on. So, Derek, thank you very much for being on with us tonight.